Hello Year 7, I hope you're well, and it's time for us to get cracking on our second lesson about your plastic pollution project. So let's have a look first of all at what you should have done last lesson. So hopefully last lesson you got some time to do lots of good research about plastic pollution in the ocean, and you found lots of interesting information and facts that you can put into your work. And don't forget, your work can take lots of different formats. You might do a poster, you might make a model, you might use the computer and do a PowerPoint, something like that. So today's lesson, if you need to be doing a little bit more research because you think you've not quite got enough, then that is fine, but don't spend the whole lesson doing that. In today's lesson, you need to make sure that you spend at least a little bit of the time turning your research into actual work that you can hand in. Now, if you are doing your work on the computer, a word of caution, remember, I do not want lots of pages of copy and paste. You can copy and paste images, but written information needs to be in your own words. So you can use facts and figures that you find, but the sentences that you put those facts and figures into need to be your own work. Now, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking to you today about a type of plastic pollution that we get in our oceans that you don't hear about quite so much. And that's because it's not as dramatic, okay? You don't get pictures of, say, dolphins or jellyfish or turtles wrapped up in huge amounts of plastic and eating them. Because what I want to talk to you about today are these tiny, tiny little things here you can see called microplastics, okay? So what are microplastics? By their definition, they are tiny little plastic fragments that are less than 5 millimeters in length. And there are absolutely billions of them in our environment. And the reason for that is that plastic never goes away. It never biodegrades, okay? It never rots. It just turns into smaller and smaller and smaller bits of plastic. And once they start to get too tiny, they can be so tiny that you can't even see them. And because they're so small, they're incredibly difficult to get out of the environment. Now, they are absolutely all over the place. There was a study done in the United States, it tells you about it here, where they looked at 37 beaches in 35 national parks, and they found microplastics at every single one of those beaches, okay? And microplastics come in different forms. You can get these things called microbeads, you get microplastics, and you get microfibers. So microplastics is possibly the easiest one to understand. Microplastics are just bits of plastic that have come off bigger bits, okay, that have broken down and are now so tiny they're less than 5 millimeters in length. Microbeads are a little bit different. So a microbead is a piece of plastic that has intentionally been made really small. And you used to get them in lots of different cosmetic products, things like face scrubs and toothpastes. The idea that those microbeads would rub away at your skin and leave your skin feeling nice and fresh, but then you would rinse it off in the shower or in the sink, and those microbeads would be out into the environment. Microbeads have now been banned, okay? You're not allowed to find them in cosmetic products at all. And if you do want any kind of microbead, it's got to not be made of plastic. It's got to be natural, like made out of peach stone or something like that. Microfibers is another one, okay? So microfibers are off clothes, and here they are massively magnified, and they are found on clothes made of plastics. So lots of clothes are good for wearing in the outdoors, like waterproof trousers and outdoor jackets and soft shells, things like that, which are very, very warm and very good for being outdoors. When you wash them, tiny little bits of the material break off, and they are microfibers. And they are found again all through our waterways, because you put your clothes in the washing machine and the washing machine goes round, and then that water is full of those microplastics, and then it goes out into the rivers. And lots of these little microplastics are so tiny that they don't get filtered out when the water goes back through a processing station in order to be made into drinking water. And the fragmentation doesn't stop. The microplastics get smaller and smaller until they're the size of dust. And when that happens, they're called nanoplastics. And nobody knows how many nanoplastics there are out in the environment because they're too small to measure. And microplastics have been found everywhere, even places that we thought in the past were absolutely pristine, like the Arctic and Antarctica. They have been found. So why are they a problem and are they dangerous? Well, the worry is with microplastics is that they're in our drinking water and they're in the food chain and they are in all our bodies. They're in my body, they're in your bodies, they're in bodies of people who live in Norway, who live in Australia, who live in America, who live all across the world, okay? And the reasons for that is it's partly drinking water because a lot of those microplastics are now too tiny to be filtered out. But it's also because if you're eating fish, well, those fish swimming in the water have ingested the microplastics. They're inside the fish. And then if you eat the fish, they're then inside you. So this isn't a problem that's been known about for a huge amount of time. So studies still continue into the effects of microplastics. But microplastics could potentially be placing harmful chemicals inside our bodies. And the reality is that scientists don't know what the impacts of that could be yet. So we have to wait and see on that one. But they're impossible to avoid. So I want to ask you if you know what something is. Okay, do you know what a nerdle is? It's a weird word. It's a bit like noodle, but not quite. Okay, so a nerdle. Have a little think about it. Okay, these, coming up now, these are nerdles. They are little plastic beads, all sorts of various colours. And I would bet you that if I put you on any beach in the world and you looked through the sand, you would find some of them, okay? They again are found all over the place, okay? So here's a little pot of them that were found on this beach. Okay, so what are they? They're little plastic pellets, because when plastic is made, and plastic is made from like materials like oil and gas, coal even, and other chemicals get put together to make plastic. And when that happens in various plastics factories across the world, they make those plastic factories make nerdles. And then those nerdles are transported all around the world to be made into plastic products. So say you owned a factory making plastic chairs for schools, you would get in touch with a company who process the oil and the gas and the coal in order to make these plastic nerdles, and then at your factory would arrive packets and packets of plastic nerdles, and you would melt them down in order to make your chairs. Now the problem with these nerdles is, as you can see if we look at the other picture where you can see them clearly, they're very small and they're round, so they just escape into the environment really, really easily. One of the main ways that they escape into the environment is when they're being shipped about on those massive containers on ships across the ocean. Those containers sometimes, and more often than you'd think, they get lost over the side into the ocean, and then they burst open and those nerdles are all lost out into the oceans. Or sometimes there is a spill from a factory that is making nerdles, and factories are often located next to rivers. Now the reason for this is water is used from the rivers in order to cool down the machinery inside the factory. So the water will get pumped into the factory, will get pumped all through the machinery to cool it down, and then back out into the rivers again. But obviously a risk with that is if there is then a spill of nerdles from the factory, okay, so something goes wrong and the nerdles get out, then those nerdles get straight into the river, and then obviously from the river they get straight into the ocean. Now that happened in the UK in 2018 in a place called Fife in Scotland. So they were doing a nerdle survey, in Scotland, and they came across a beach in Fife, and there's a picture of it just here. And on that beach, they found nearly 500,000 nurdles. Okay, and it was sort of, my goodness, where have all these nurdles came from? They knew they'd find a few, but to find so many in one place was just absolutely crazy. Now, just along the coast at a place called Grangemouth, there was a plastics factory owned by a company called Ineos, who is owned by this man here, Jim Ratcliffe, and the finger of blame was pointed very firmly at Ineos, and they sort of said, well, look, all these nurdles have got to have come from your factory. Ineos have tried to deny it, but basically having that many nurdles in one place, it can only have come from one area. You know, it had to have been a spill from that petrochemicals factory. So it does happen, unfortunately, accidents where these plastics get out into the environment. And as you can see from the pictures, it's not a sort of a big dramatic problem like a big oil spill or, you know, plastic bags floating around in the oceans, but it is still a really, really big problem because these little plastics are so hard to clear up and they get into absolutely everything. Okay, so what should you do for the rest of the lesson? Now I have told you a little bit about microplastics, and you might want to include some information about microplastics in your project. You don't have to. You know, you might have decided to do it about something else, but if you want to include any of this, then you can. Okay then, so just to remind you, for the rest of the lesson, what should you be doing? If you need to, continue to do a little bit of research into plastic in the oceans, but do not spend the whole of the lesson doing this, okay? Start to put together your project for me into something that you're able to hand in. In the last couple of minutes, you should quickly fill in the assignment that this video is attached to so that I can see you are staying up to date. And remember that during the lesson time, I am available for you. I will be running a live lesson. So log on to Teams and go to the main chat page. You will see a little join button next to a camera in the chat, and you will be able to click on that, and then I will be able to talk to you if you want to, or if you just need any help or support. If you are doing this lesson later than the scheduled lesson time, then I'm afraid I won't be online for you, but you can send me an email or you can message me on the main chat and I will get back to you. Okay, thanks very much, Year 7. Goodbye and have a good day.